Crash and burn.
Hey everybody. So tonight I am looking to discuss the 1984 documentary Streetwise. Now this is one of those documentaries that I saw it originally back in high school. It has a feature film that is attached to it by the name of American Heart, starring Jeff Bridges and Edward Furlong. They are playing two characters that are based off one of the subjects in this and the subject's father. The subject in question is a kid by the name of Dwayne Pomeroy, and his father, throughout the course of this documentary, he's incarcerated, I believe, for arson. And their relationship, like I said, was the basis for the movie American Heart. Now, like I said, I saw this way back in high school. I saw both of them together. And I mean, this is like endlessly compelling. I knew right away, like some documentaries, when it comes to documentaries focusing on either drug addiction or homelessness, prostitution, or in this case, which this documentary is a mix of all three, you know, you go into it sort of feeling like, oh, fuck, I don't know if I really want to touch this. Like, for example, off the top of my head, Lucifer Valentine's Black Metal Veins. I've watched that a ton too, but there's something really gross and off-putting about that documentary, which of course is the point, because Lucifer Valentine is a fucking scumbag. But I don't get the gross and off-putting vibe from this. This is just so engaging. The kids that are featured in this, I believe it's shot through 82, 83 through early 84. And everybody in this movie is roughly, I think, Erin Blackwell, who's the primary focus of this tiny. I think she's probably the youngest person here. She's 14. She's a 14-year-old prostitute. But then there's Rat, and Rat is 14 to 17. Dwayne's 14 to 17. Patrice is 14 to 19, somewhere in there. And Frank, I think, the same. And Lulu, again, Lulu's killed in 85 as a result of being stabbed when she was 22. So, again, everybody's really young, but I don't know, like there isn't a sense of complete and utter hopelessness from this. There's something really, really motivating, because I've watched this a bunch throughout the course of time. I found it at my branch of the local library way back, and I stole it from that point because this is like one of the more difficult documentaries to track down. I know Criterion released it. Those Criterion discs, they're not the easiest things to find, of course, especially over the past 10, 15 years, seeing as how everybody sort of lost interest in physical media. But I knew going in that I was going to end up loving this. And it's so gritty. It's so ugly. It's so real, but I don't know, there's something really humanizing about it all. Like all of the subjects that are featured in this documentary, it doesn't feel that, like Martin Bell, who's the director, it doesn't feel like he put their tortured lives on display for the sake of like exploitation. Like it doesn't feel like maybe in there somewhere there's some way to profit off of these kids, because that's not the case. Well, documentaries usually aren't the most profitable things in the first place, but it just feels so real and so raw. And I love how, despite the fact that everybody is living in pretty much abject poverty, there's a sense of community among the group of them. They all know each other. Dwayne knows Rat, Rat knows Tiny, and, you know, Tiny knows Patrice, and on it goes. And Lulu's thrown into the mix. And Lulu is absolutely amazing. She's sort of like, she's this hyper tough chick where there's like no joking about that. Like there isn't, like I've noticed a lot of the times with people in documentaries, when they do sort of signal out to being physically intimidating, a lot of the times it's just it's a story they're telling. But Lulu is incredibly strong and incredibly fierce, and she's sort of the de facto protector of this group of people, kind of, at least as far as the females are concerned. At one point throughout the documentary, Lulu finds this one chick being groped by this homeless guy, and he's bigger than Lulu. And Lulu, like, physically forces him to go back and find the chick and apologize to her before she lets him leave. And like I said, he's bigger than her. And so Lulu is not anybody to fuck with. And that's another thing I liked about this, is it's like, these are real people. they're engaging, they have layers, and there's a lot going on in their lives, despite the fact that they're leading some of like the roughest lives I've ever seen. It's like they all still kind of have hope. You know, like Patrice, for example, he is known, he's the black dude in this who gets in the fight with the street preacher. Not really the fight, it's more like a debate of sorts with this street preacher who is trying to like tell all the kids and everybody to, you know, come to Christ and yada, yada, yada. And Patrice is arguing with him about this and that. And they end up coming to this conclusion where they both really like each other. They shake hands. And it's a really fun mini debate of sorts. Patrice is like, I'll show up to your, like the shelter where you're going to let me stay and everything with my girlfriend. And the guy's like, nope, if you do, you and her sleep separately. He's like, there's none of that shit going on here. And Patrice is like, what, man? No, man, I'm sleeping with my girl. And he's like, no, not at our place, you're not. And there's still like that sense of togetherness, despite the fact that initially, like the street preacher's a lot older than Patrice. And at first, like I said, there's that obvious sense of age-based adversity, but they still come together in the end. And that's what I liked most about this, was that sense of togetherness. Like Rat and that older dude he's hanging out with, the guy that teaches him how to ride trains. They like that older dude. At first, when I saw the guy, I was like, this is kind of creepy because Rat's like, 14 or whatever. And this guy's like clearly in his 20s. And you always kind of get that sketchy vibe because you know that like the idea of a sex assault or sex abuse is ever present in this, because Erin, Tiny, as a matter of fact, discusses briefly how she's been raped a couple times. And it's just sort of the cost of living as a prostitute, like it's just going to happen. And the older dude, whose name I really wish I could recall right now, but I can't for some reason, he actually really seems to be there for Rat. He really seems to be helping the kid out. And there's one thing that Rat does that is so brilliant. I ended up telling a buddy of mine after I saw the movie back in high school, and he tried it, but it got fucked up when he did it. But they of course, they struggle to find food. So what they do occasionally is they'll call up this local pizza place, and they'll order like a weird pizza, and like they can't just order a pepperoni pizza, because if they choose to cancel that, then the store will just sell it to somebody else. But if they order a pizza with a bunch of weird shit on it, and then they call back and say, oh, yo, I'm so sorry, I have to cancel the pizza. They're, of course, calling from a payphone that's right by the pizza place. They watch the pizza dude take the unpaid for pizza with all this weird shit on it, and they walk it out back to the dumpster and toss it in there. And then they go over and grab it, and they have a fresh, hot meal. Now, like I said, I did explain this to somebody I knew back in high school afterwards, and they tried it at the Pizza where we were growing up. And the problem was, apparently, when the guy threw it out in the dumpster, he threw it like face down, and the box opened, because this was, of course, pre-COVID. Now the pizza boxes all got those handy little rip locks on them. And so the pizza landed face down, open in the dumpster, and that was that. And needless to say, my buddy did not need the food. He only did it because I said it was really clever, and I told him how Rat did it in this. Now, I think one of the most disgusting aspects of this documentary, unfortunately, is Erin Blackwell's life, Tiny. She's a 14-year-old prostitute who could easily pass for 10 or 11. And the majority of the dudes picking her up are guys 60 plus. There's one dude that picks her up. She hops in. He's clearly in his 70s. I think the other guy's in his 60s or his 70s as well. And she even addresses this. Like, she says, I just don't understand why anybody that age would want to have sex with somebody my age. She's like they're perverts. And the scariest part about that for me is these dudes, this isn't their first rodeo. You know what I mean? They've been picking up purposefully underage prostitutes probably from the time that they got their licenses back in their 20s, because pedophilia isn't something you just sort of fall into as you get older. If you've got a thing for kids, you've got a thing for kids from the time that you discover your sexuality. And so the grossest part for me was realizing, like the first time seeing this, that these guys have been doing it forever. And Erin's lucky that she was never abducted and murdered, because some of these dudes, no doubt, are also sexual sadists. They have a number of sexual paraphilias working inside of them, and there's no cure for that. And it's just so ugly that these men behave this way, so lazily. Like the older dudes that you see pick her up, the couple of them, they just they don't even really look nervous. They look more like they're just checking around them, making sure that as they pull off the corner that, you know, another car doesn't hit them or something. Not so much because if the car hits them, they'll be found in the car with an underage prostitute. But no, just a general, you know, you check before you pull out and then you go. Because this is just another day where I'm going to go fuck another 14-year-old. And it's amazing to think that this documentary, again, came out in 1984. And those guys, of course, I mean, the older ones, the guy in his 70s or his 80s, the one guy, he's gone. And that means he most likely got away with it. I mean, maybe he got caught here or there, but he died of old age. And he was old when this came out in 84. So he's long gone now. And it's just fucking revolting to think that so many people get away with this shit daily. So that would, I think, would be the most taxing part of this, emotionally speaking, would be Aaron's story. But then there's also a quick shot of a girl by the name of Roberta Hayes. I believe she pops up around the hour mark. She's wearing the white ski jacket. She's got blonde hair to about here. And she doesn't have any, like, she doesn't talk at all. You just see her. And unfortunately, she would end up becoming, I believe, the 47th victim of Gary Ridgway, who was the Green River Killer. Her remains, I think, were discovered in 91 somewhere. So there's also that element that they tossed in, which was unintentional, of course, but it is a real drawback, unfortunately, to having to walk the razor's edge like these kids do, is that inevitably you're going to come up against some piece of shit like Gary Ridgway, and he could potentially end their lives. And the other thing I always wondered about this is what happened to the dog. Because in the old, the abandoned hotel or whatever, where a bunch of them are staying, Aaron's hanging out there at one point, and there's a puppy there. Later on, when Aaron is wearing that sort of like black funeral getup with the black funeral hat, you see her walking the little dog. And I always wondered what became of that dog here. I mean, of course, again, the dog, whether it had the best life or the worst life, it's 2025, and this documentary came out in the early 80s, so that dog is long gone. But I have always wondered what exactly happened to that dog. I mean, there's so much sadness in this. Patty, for example, she's a prostitute. She dies of AIDS. Lulu stabbed to death in September of 1985. Patrice, unfortunately, after staying homeless for his entire 52 years on Earth, he's shot and killed at 52. So he spent pretty much his entire life, 52 years, homeless. And there's a Wikipedia page, of course, dedicated to Streetwise, naturally, like, you know, a million other things. And there is a part of it that does a really good job of breaking down everything that happened to all of the principal subjects in this. Now, other than what I've sort of blabbed here, I would suggest refraining from reading that until you've seen the movie, because it is that much more impactful. I mean, I dated this girl once who the second you told her the movie had a twist, she'd run to Wikipedia and look it up and be like, oh, yeah, the guy's wife wasn't a wife. She was his uncle the whole time. And there we'd be like, well, I don't need to see this movie about the fucking uncle-wife killer anymore, thanks to you. So if you are one of those people, attempt to refrain from going to the Wikipedia page until you see the movie, even though this isn't an easy movie to find at this point. But nevertheless, if you do, know that the movie will most likely be ruined for you, and I sort of did my part to do that as well. I won't destroy how the film ends for Dwayne Pomeroy, unfortunately, but when you find out what happened to him, you'll understand, I think, why Martin Bell chose to sort of immortalize him in the movie American Heart, again with Jeff Bridges and Edward Furlong. I think, actually, that's where I'm going to leave it, because this is running entirely too long. So, like always, thank you so much for hanging out with me for, Jesus, almost 14 minutes while I discussed the 1984 documentary Streetwise. Like always, if you like this review or you like this documentary, don't forget to go and do something nice for somebody. It's easy. Give $1 to charity, or hold the door for somebody, help somebody carry their bags to their car or something. You know, but most importantly, the most important thing here is that you know that the world kicks so much more ass because you are in it. You matter, and the world is a better place because you are in it. I'm getting out of here. Have a good night.